Very intrigued to get your thoughts on this game because it's two teams that are sort of hard to figure out right now. Bengals at Panthers. It's a Bengals team that their record is 0-3. They don't feel like an 0-3 team. Yeah, the way that they played against the Patriots was really disappointing, but they went into Arrowhead and could have very well won that game. They didn't because of the penalty and the Chiefs get into, field goal range. Like I get it, but they were right there and they were a great team against the Chiefs. I would also say that offensively, they were on fire against the Washington Commanders. They just went up against Jaden Daniels, who, kind of like you were talking about at the top of the show, NFL doesn't have a ton of film on what the NFL version of Jaden Daniels is going to be. So I think he confused them a lot with what he was able to do and how he could escape and his throws on the run and all that stuff. But they go up against now a Panthers team, which is back at home after a major road win against the Raiders, where Andy Dalton starts in this game. What is your thoughts with this one? What is the matchup that matters here for you with Bengals Panthers?
Yeah, I mean, the defense in Cincinnati, or the Cincinnati's defense looked lost in that game against the Commanders. I was just completely shocked given the fact that Joe Burrow was everything you wanted him to be. They got T. Higgins back. Their offense looked more complete. They were running the ball more. It looked more balanced. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better offensive performance. And yet the defense kind of gives it up. And I think that stems a lot from the fact that they don't have much of a pass rush outside of Trey Hendrickson. And I've been so high on Trey Hendrickson for years now because I don't think that he gets the credit he deserves. He has a 21% pass rush win rate. The next best teammate of his on that defense, KJ Henry and Lawrence Guy, who are at 12.5% pass rush win rate. So there is a massive difference. Trey Hendrickson is basically trying to get pressure on his own. It doesn't really always work, and you see teams be able to exploit that. So my matchup that matters is Trey Hendrickson versus Andy Dalton. Can he get to Andy Dalton just on his own? This Panthers offensive line, we know it has not been good. It wasn't good for Bryce Young. They were better under Andy Dalton, and I think we're seeing that they actually have improved this year now that you have a more experienced quarterback. But I do think that the Panthers benefited from the backup bump last week, and now that teams know that, all right, this is Andy Dalton's team, and there's a ton of film on Andy Dalton. Everybody knows who Andy Dalton is. He's been with multiple teams and multiple systems. You're going to run a pretty vanilla offense, if I had to guess, and especially in the run game as well. So there's going to be an opportunity here for the Bengals to get right, and they really, really need to get some pressure on Andy Dalton, because if you can't get pressure on this Carolina Panthers offensive line, then I'm really going to start to worry about you. Because as of right now, like you said, the Bengals are not really, they shouldn't be an 0-3 team, or they don't look like an 0-3 team.
Right.
This, I think, is the game. And again, I've pointed this out too this week with the Washington Commanders loss. The Bengals are playing a fourth place schedule this year. The Commanders were one of those teams that you got to play because of the fourth place schedule. You were supposed to win that game.
Right.
You are absolutely supposed to win this game against the Carolina Panthers too.
Yeah.
So you need to start winning some of these games that you're supposed to win. And being your schedule was so much easier this year because of where you finished after the Joe Burrow injury last season, all that other stuff.
It feels like it's, again, not that I'm trying to make excuses for Cincinnati, but maybe like awful timing for them, because they played if they would have been playing the Bryce Young Panthers, this game is probably, the Bengals are favored by double digits, right? But they're not, and you don't know what Andy Dalton's going to be. And my matchup that matters is similar to yours, because I do think that up front it's going to matter a lot, because if the Bengals, to your point, you focused on Hendrickson and how great Hendrickson has been and how he's sort of been a lone wolf out there for them. I'm focusing a little bit more on Carolina's side, because where the offensive line hasn't totally figured out, especially with run blocking, they haven't been as great with run blocking. Pass blocking, they've actually been pretty good. Their 82.3 pass blocking grade as a team is third best in the NFL. So I think that's also, just to give them the recognition that they deserve, that's also kind of why you move on from Bryce Young when you did, because I think they looked at this team and this offensive line through the first 2 weeks and then went, okay, it's not like last year. It's not like we can sit here and say, well, you got to give them an offensive line. Well, you got to give them wide receivers. They felt like they had those. And even with the Andy Dalton start in there 3 weeks in, the offensive line's actually not playing too bad. So can the Bengals step up the way that they need to? I think that is going to be a telltale of who ends up winning this game, especially with it being in Carolina. They got a lot of momentum. They're feeling good. They're riding high. The Bengals, the vibes are low right now. It's 0-3. They're very close to the season slipping away from them already, just 3 games into the year. So I think that this is pivotal for both of these teams for a couple of different reasons, and it presents another bit of a trap game for the Bengals. And my plus factor here is Chuba Hubbard, because where we all want to talk about Andy Dalton and how great he has been and how fun, last week was just watching him throw it all over the yard. Sorry, Walt. 82.7 rushing grade for Hubbard last week with 114 rushing yards, 21 carries. Also had 5 catches on 5 targets for 55 yards. You don't want Andy Dalton throwing the ball 35 times a game, right? I mean, you want to be more balanced than that. And if the Panthers have the opportunity to now be a balanced football team, now we're talking about somebody who can actually compete week in and week out. So to me, if Chuba Hubbard can play the way that he did last week, yeah, we're talking about a game that's probably going to be a toss-up and close to the very end. But who's your plus factor in this?
No, I do love that call out too, just because you're right. I mean, Andy Dalton, the way to protect the team from Andy Dalton and Andy Dalton from himself is just not to put so much on his shoulders. I went to the other side, and I know that we talked about how Cincinnati did everything they needed to do in that game against Washington offensively. However, there are still some holes, and we saw the fact that T. Higgins came back. It did look more well-rounded, all that kind of stuff. But Burrow is not being helped out by his receivers nearly as much as I think that we would like. Mm-hmm. So he's scrambled as many times as Kyler Murray and Patrick Mahomes, to give you some sort of frame of reference. Joe Burrow is not known as a scrambling quarterback. That's not necessarily who he is. And to ask him to do that, he still is 16th. He's only 16th in completion rate, but he's top 10 in accuracy percentage. And that's, I think, where like you kind of start to see the cracks in how this passing game is developing and how his receivers, if his receivers are helping him out. The Bengals are tied for 6th in drop passes. So I need more. And I realize that, defenses have paid a lot of attention to Ja'Marr while T was out. T is now back in. You now have multiple guys. We saw Ja'Marr kind of take advantage of some more single coverage moments in that game against Washington. I need more of that to continue, and I need Joe Burrow to distribute the ball a little bit more because he trusts his receivers, and I don't think it's his fault necessarily. We saw him, in the beginning of the season throwing to a bunch of tight ends because Ja'Marr was still ramping up. Ja'Marr should be all the way ramped up now. T. Higgins should also be all the way ramped up now. I need to see more from these Cincinnati receivers and helping their quarterback out.
Yeah, basically, I don't know if it was both of his big throws to Ja'Marr Chase, but I know at least one of them was, if you're going to play single high, whether it's cover 3 or cover 1 against Ja'Marr Chase on the outside, like Joe knows that the safety's not going to be able to get over to him, so he's going to give his guy that chance every single time. And I know at least on the touchdown, that was that situation. So I just don't know how much Carolina's going to play that, right? I feel like Carolina's going to be a little bit more conservative, try to not give up the big play, a lot more too high stuff, a lot more quarters. So we will see. We will see.